What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto's loneliness created a new tailed beast inside him? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. 12 years ago, a powerful demon attacked Konohagakure no Sato, the village of Hidden Leaf. It was the Kyuubi no Kitsune, the fox of 9 tails. It was enormous. A true demon of legend that made the often most ridiculous fables seem believable. A single swing of its massive, crimson-furred tails could level whole mountains or summon tsunamis. Only few mountains could equal its size, and even fewer that could dwarf the demon's stature. No one knew why it attacked or for how long it continued its rampage. It could have been hours, days, or even weeks, and no one could have told the difference. They were too busy running for cover and shelter. A vain attempt. Many lives were lost and taken. The fortunate ones were either crushed by the demon's massive tail and/or paws or were reduced to ashes by its demonic chakra. The unfortunate were the ones eaten and torn to pieces by its jagged fanged jaws and were forced and compelled to see into the monster's blood-red eyes that could make even the devil tremble in fear before they fell into death's welcoming embrace. By the time the Yondaime, the 4th Hokage, arrived to face the demon himself, the village was in ruins. Bodies littered the rubbled streets, the surrounding forest was scarred with destruction, and many shinobi died trying to fend off the monstrous beast. Atop the head of Gamabunta, the boss of the frog summons, stood the Yondaime Hokage, his golden blonde and spiky hair rustling in the wind with his white, flame-trimmed cape over his Junin uniform, a newborn child in his arms. The child was a boy with a spiral seal on his belly, twisting around the freshly cut navel. His hair was blonde. The Kyuubi chuckled in mocking laughter. No human could ever hope to stand a chance against a beast as great as he, boss summon or no. And to bring his own flesh and blood onto the battlefield. What arrogance these humans have. It was a miracle their race has lasted so long with their obvious stupidity. Such were the Kyuubi's last thoughts before it was blinded by a bright, blue light from where the Yondaime stood and felt its soul and energy ripped from its body and sealed into another, its prison for time untold, and saw nothing but darkness. After the demon's essence was sealed into the sleeping boy's body, the Shinigami, death god, who was summoned by the Yondaime for his sealing ritual, spoke in an ominous voice before disappearing into the darkness. You have 5 minutes before your soul leaves this plane of existence. Use your time well. And the apparition left. Gee, thanks, the Yondaime thought sarcastically. His gaze went to the child in his arms and already felt the pangs of regret and sorrow for his child. He knew the boy would be treated harshly, but he hoped prayed his son could survive his coming ordeals. Forgive me, my son, he thought, but I had to defend my village, my home, our home. And I'm sorry I forced you into life possibly worse than death. But I know you're strong, and will remain strong. You didn't even cry when the demon was sealed into you. The Yondaime groaned painfully, his knees buckled and fell beneath his weight. His strength was waning. He didn't have long until his time ended. I wish I could give you a good name, but maybe you can find one for yourself one day. Grow strong and make me proud. Grow strong, my son. His soul was gone, and with it, his hopes followed. The Yondaime, Kazama Arashi, fell from his perch on Gamabunta's head and descended to the ground with the child still in his arms. Sarutobi, the Sandaime, the 3rd, deftly caught the two in midair and gently laid them down on the grass after Gamabunta said his solemn goodbyes for the death of his summoner and left in an explosion of smoke and dust. Sarutobi scooped the baby child in his arms and his eyes softened looking at the boy's innocent and sleeping face. He turned his gaze toward the surrounding forest and called for someone by whistling sharply. A Konoha Chunin leapt into the clearing and awaited for the Sandaime's orders, which were to bring the Yondaime's body back to the village for a proper burial. The shinobi nodded and carefully lifted his former leader's body over his shoulder and took off towards the ruined village. The Sandaime sighed as returned his gaze to the sleeping infant, and he, too, felt regretful for the boy's future. I know you may not hear me, Arashi-kun, thought the Sandaime, but I swear I will do everything in my power to keep your son safe. I hope you don't mind if I name him Naruto. After all, you were always a glutton for ramen. Sarutobi chuckled. Naruto. Yes, your name shall be Naruto for now. Do us all proud, Uzumaki, Naruto. 13 years later. The sun was shining brightly, the breeze was refreshingly cool, and the skies were clearer than river water. Such were the common weather conditions Konoha village experienced nearly all year round. After the Kyuubi's defeat, the village attempted to rebuild their once glorious home, and succeeded. Their shinobi forces were once again strong and stable, trade and commerce flourished, and many of the larger and stronger families were living in almost royalty. No one was poor or homeless, but there were many orphans as a result of the aftermath of the demon's attack. One such orphan yawned and stretched as he awoke to the new day. Blonde hair, blue eyes, tan skin, and whisker marks on his cheeks were the most distinguishing features Naruto Uzumaki exuded. He hopped out of his bed and surveyed his apartment as he always did in the morning. The apartment was bland, with no trace of clutter or trash and only the necessities provided. A single table, a small refrigerator, a dresser, a small bathroom with a toilet, sink and a shower stall big enough for two, a stove and balcony perch outside the back of the apartment which gave an excellent view of the whole of the south portion of Konoha. He never kept his clothes in his dresser because of villagers often raiding his apartment in the years past. He kept them under the floorboards beneath his bed. Remembering he had class that morning, he wasted no time getting dressed in his slab-armored net shirt under his orange, verging red coat jacket with a white fleece collar and matching pants. Strapping on his kunai and shuriken holsters to his thighs, he also put his rear pouch buckled to his belt and slipped his feet into his heavy shinobi sandals. He took one last look at his home interior and left for the academy. If anyone could find anything of value in there, they were more than welcome to it. Naruto's POV. A warm light from an unveiled sun, a cool breeze that felt refreshingly good, and the scenery of an unending forest. A beautiful day some find the only reason to wake up to. I hated days like these. It's not that I hate the weather in particular or personally. I just hate it because it reminds me of everything I have never or will ever have. Warmth, comfort, peace, solace. I prefer clouded, rainy days. I don't like them in particular, but I depend on them in some way, like the dark atmosphere numbs the pain of my hate, confusion, and loneliness I feel every day in this village. I scowled. These thoughts of doubts and such were going to weaken me, suppress my strength and make me create unnecessary uncertainties. I looked at my clothes. And I scowled, remembering vividly what the first person said when they saw me over 4 years ago. "You idiot. You call yourself a ninja with those clothes? You're a walking bull's eye. Stop trying to get attention cause it ain't gonna work, stupid monster." I admit, I did try to gain attention by wearing bright colors and even screaming my head off that I would one day become Hokage, just to feel special that I was aiming for a high goal. I even pulled a lot of well-planned pranks all around the village just to be noticed, even if it wasn't the attention that I wanted. I wanted a family, someone that would at least accept my existence. But I found no one. So I gave up trying to get the attention of others, and focused solely on training to make myself stronger, fierce enough to face the villagers if they continued to attack me. Like before when I was thrown out of the orphanage when I was 5 years old. I didn't bother to change my cloths. After all, what difference would it make if my cloths were darker and appeared more professional? Cloths don't make a shinobi. It's the experience that makes one both an assassin and warrior. Besides, thanks to a little jutsu I developed, I can change the color of my cloths at will with a little chakra. What people around me never knew was that my cloths were made especially for combat. Rough and strong to handle most kunai blades and never tear to the elements, and they were light. Perfect clothes for a shinobi, but I guess color is all that matters to public opinion. Anyhow, what did it matter? Any good shinobi can blend into the surroundings regardless of their clothing. I learned how to spying on a masked Junin with gray hair while he was desperately trying to escape another Junin with a funky haircut that kept shouting nonsense about the spirit of youth or something. I never heard their names, but I found their chase hilarious at the time but discovered by accident how to use stealth thanks to that masked Junin, though I'll keep that to myself until I need to use it. A good shinobi doesn't flaunt his skills like a kid with a new toy. And here I am, in class, after a 10-minute run across the village rooftops listening to my teacher, Uruka-sensei, talk about possible scenarios that could happen on the battlefield or mission. Thank Kami I can always manage a seat in the back of the class for the sake of my sanity. There are two girls in class that do nothing but bicker and yell about who is the best kunoichi in the class. The screams are loud enough to raise the dead. Out of boredom, I profiled a select few in the class that were perhaps the most skilled amongst the rest. Yamanaka Ino. A rather pretty girl with long blonde hair she keeps in a ponytail, blue eyes and wears a purple outfit and bandages around her legs. She has good shinobi skills. Haruno Sakura. Another girl that depends on makeup to look appealing. She has shoulder-length pale pink hair she keeps tied by a ribbon, jade green eyes and a red Chinese dress. She's probably the weakest female in the whole village, but is decently skilled on the basics, but that's about it. She screams like a banshee and she's hopelessly infatuated with Sasuke, another student. Hyuga Hinata. A shy girl with short violet hair, lavender-colored eyes and soft features. She wears a baggy coat encrusted with the burning flame, the crest of the Hyuga clan, the most prestigious clan in the village and the country. She also wears black trousers. She's very shy around people and often blushes when I lock eyes with her. Otherwise, she's one of the better students in the class, great intelligence, excellent combat and survival skills and never gloats about her achievements and is very humble. Nara Shikamaru. A guy who does nothing but complain and says everything is troublesome. He has long black hair he keeps up in a pineapple manner. He wears a thin gray vest over a fishnet shirt and black knee-length trousers. Despite his slacker attitude, he's a frickin' genius. Akamichi Choji. A big-boned guy who often stuffs his face with chips he pulls out of his ass and is a friend to Shikamaru. He has brown hair and swirls on his cheeks. He wears a green overcoat with matching shorts and a white shirt that says, "Eat," on the front and bandaged legs. He excels in heavy striking taijutsu thanks to his family's art of increasing the size of their bodies and limbs. He hates it when people call him fat. Inazuka Kiba. A boy with a very feral appearance that smells and even acts like a dog. He's loud enough to give Sakura some competition and always brings a small dog with him in his coat. He wears black pants and a fleece-cuffed hood jacket. I just call him Dog Boy. The only thing that he has that is greater than his loudness is his arrogance. Aburame Shino. A silent guy that speaks only when necessary and is very intelligent. He wears dark, round sunglasses, a high-collar gray coat that covered the lower half of his face and brown trousers. His hair is spiky and unruly with an insect-like appearance. As far as I know, his family's very mysterious and he's ruthless when fighting. He likes to talk to bugs. And finally Uchiha Sasuke. Best in class, village heartthrob and born from one of the greatest clans in the village. But they were murdered 5 years ago and now he claimed himself an avenger of a noble cause, to find and kill the murderer of his clan. He has handsome face, black spiky hair, and onyx eyes. He wears a blue turtleneck shirt and white shorts with bandaged legs. The scenario lessons soon ended and Iruka-sensei cleared his throat to get the class's attention. "Alright class," he said, "today we're going to have the first part of the genin exams after you all have your recess period. During your recess, do what you like, train, play, or whatever else you want to prepare for the exam. Understood?" The class nodded. "Very well then. Now, before you all go out to the fields, who can tell me what happened on the 10th of October almost 13 years ago?" I scoffed. October 10th is my birthday, or more like a day of hell whenever I walked out in the streets when the Kyuubi festivals were running. That's the day the Yondaime-sama defeated the Kyuubi when the demon attacked the village, Sakura yelled. The next instant, my belly exploded in pain like a furnace was shoved into my stomach with searing coals. I've never felt pain like this in my whole life, and I've taken beatings that could kill most people. I took deep breaths to try to relax my belly muscles because of their reflex in attempting to dull the pain. It took some time, but the pain thankfully began to lessen just as Iruka-sensei dismissed us for our recreation period. We had only 1 hour. Normal POV. Throughout the whole recess, Naruto remained under the shade of one of the trees scattered around the field with his back against the trunk of the said tree, contemplating the whats and whys of his episode of discomfort in class while the rest of the students were passing back and forth doing whatever that caught their interests. His mind continued to shuffle through every possible reason that could have elicited something so spontaneous as his belly burning with pain. His stomach was fine when he woke up that morning, and he hadn't eaten anything spoiled, rotten, or unhealthy, so why did it flare with such intense pain after the pink-haired banshee screamed about the date of Kyuubi's defeat? Naruto's eyes snapped open immediately as realization struck him like lightning. He didn't dare draw breath as he pieced together everything in less time than it took to blink. The whispered insults. Monster. Damn demon. Bastard fox. The coinciding dates, October 10th. The day of his birth. The day of Kyuubi's attack. The day of the Yoneme's fall. The Kyuubi's fall. The murderous mobs that always shot the same threats. Now you'll die like you should have years ago against our leader, demon. The adults' cruel treatment of him. The beatings, the hateful glares, the pillages of his apartment. The searing pain in his belly. Bastard fox. That's why they hated him. That's why he was treated so cruelly. He was the demon of their past. He was the Kyuubi no Kitsune. He released the breath he was unaware he was holding in a shuddery sigh, casting his gaze to ground around his feet. Torment ripped at his soul as his mind continued to repeat everything he discovered, echoing through his memory like a cruel shadow that haunted him with its presence. In what seemed like eternity since he had first met Sarutobi and felt belonged in a hateful place of no solace, gratefulness grasped him with relief. He was grateful for shade cover the tree's branches provided, because without it, he doubted anyone could miss his tears that slid down his cheeks as he silently wept with a look of abject sadness etched across his face. A tear for every hour of his suffering, his hopes of acceptance, gone in the blink of an eye. A torrent of tears. So, I guess there is such things as fate. If someone can be damned to a life, worse than death. He let out another shaky breath as his thoughts continued to become more saddening. Will I ever find peace? Those were his last thoughts before bringing his gaze to the clear sky, seeming like it was mocking his pain, promising him what he will never have, and brought it back to the ground. His empty eyes never left that spot, even as he faintly heard someone approaching. On the opposite side of the recreation field, one person's unwavering gaze was focused solely on the object of her longtime affections, Naruto. Hyuga Hinata, heir to the Hyuga clan and one of the most timid kunoichi in Konoha, watched Naruto closely using her blood limit, the Byakugan, pale eyes, which was almost pushed to its limits as though she were trying to burn his form in her mind to lock away like a precious gem. Of course, Hinata would exchange perhaps the whole Hyuga fortune if it meant she could be near him. She sighed wistfully as she felt a great deal of disappointment in herself. She always felt great courage in herself when she watched Naruto from afar, but that courage always whisked away like a scent in the wind whenever she was so much as 10 feet near him. Hinata remembered in her childhood years when she first saw and met him. A bundle of energy and confidence, yelling at the top of his lungs his dreams and aspirations, and never had a doubt in any action he took. Many children liked him for his positive and friendly attitude that made even the gloomiest days seem bright. It saddened her though when she saw how the other children outside of class and the majority of the adults in the village gave him such scornful glares whenever Naruto was noticed. But all that paled in comparison to the look on his face whenever someone treated him harshly, a silly happy grin so big he has to close his eyes. Hinata knew at a young age how to read people's emotions without using her blood limit and saw it was only a mask to cover his pain, confusion, and anger. Naruto didn't deserve any contempt by anyone, not even when he had pulled numerous and elaborate pranks in his early years of his academy days. At least Iruka-sensei treated him like a normal student. One day, however, it all just stopped. His cheerfulness, his friendly attitude, his enthusiasm, his mask. It all simply stopped when he was 8 years old. He became rather distant and indifferent to everything and everyone around him. He never smiled or showed much emotion but an almost fierce determination. A determination to conquer almost anything in the world and die facing it with courage unmatched. A trait Hinata found very desirable. She blushed. Hinata snapped herself out of her reverie when she saw Naruto visibly flinch and held a look of aghast horror and sadness that could pierce the soul, gazing into the sky like it could offer some answer that remained unanswered, and lowered his gaze to the ground, the life and energy of his very soul seeming to have been drained from him in an instant. Hinata herself was beginning to feel the sting of tears threatening to erupt from her eyes as she almost felt the pain and sadness her crush was feeling. It managed to hold them at bay through willpower alone until she saw what should never grace his cheeks: tears. Enough tears to form a lake of turmoil as he shifted his gaze to the sky for only a moment. The distant look in his eyes caused pain to shoot through her heart while she wept, sitting the shade like her object of affection. Not a second after she saw his tears, Hinata was on her feet and strode hurriedly to Naruto, but she halted her advance as she noticed someone approaching her crush. A girl with a red dress and pink hair. Haruno Sakura. Hinata scowled at the girl. It could only be the weak squealing slut, as Hinata non-verbally called her. After all, who else in Konoha had natural pink hair and was weaker than a wounded animal? No one, that's who. Sakura stopped in front of Naruto and put her hands on her hips and leered down on the dark orange-clad form as if she were superior to him. Not by an immeasurable gap. "Hey there, Uzumaki," she taunted, "why do you look so down? Are you crying?" "Yeah, you're crying, like a sniveling baby." Everyone on the field immediately stood still in their activities as they watched the taunting scene unfold. Many were wary as to what Naruto would do in response to the girl's insults. After all, quite a few were aware of his physical strength, and it was more or less as simple as this. If you plan to taunt Naruto, don't. You'll live long enough to see the next sunset. Ironically, as smart as she claimed to be, Sakura completely lacked common sense. "Are you crying because of your stupid failures?" Naruto didn't move or respond. "What's the matter? Are you deaf and dumb?" "Still nothing. Stop ignoring me, you orphan brat," she yelled. Naruto stirred slightly, then registered the words Sakura directed at him. He had heard with vague interest of Ino and Sakura's other friends proposing a bet to insult him for a few laughs, but that had missed his attention at the time. Regardless, she said something unforgivable and he wanted a painful payment in return for her insults. Slowly, he pushed himself off the ground and stood with his hands in his pockets to hide their shaking. His hair obscured his face and silhouette. "What do you want, brat?" His words left his lip in a cold, emotionless voice that held an edge of a threat of harm that shook Sakura's senses to the core. If she didn't know any better, she could have sworn his words and voice alone could kill her. Sakura replied in a shaken voice as the effects of Naruto's cold words still left her. Just wondering why a two-year dropout S still bothers to attend the academy. AF failure for 2 years and you think you can P-pass? Why, you must be an idiot. Throughout the whole exchange, Hinata had heard every word and was visibly seething with rage. How dare that bitch? Unknown to everyone but a select few crowded around the arguing pair, Hinata's Byakugan was focused to an almost unbearable strain and collected enough chakra in her hand to perpetually paralyze a limb or even rupture a few vital organs of Sakura's. She would pay for wrongly insulting Naruto for entertainment. Just as Hinata was about to rush Sakura with enough killing intent to freeze a pulsing heart, Naruto turned and left toward one of the academy entrances along the nearest wall. "Your words mean nothing to me, as does your presence, so don't bother trying to get my attention. Your worth is as little as dust to me, so move along, bitch. You're irritating." His words were once again cold and emotionless with a bored tone to it, as though dealing with her was as simple as brushing off a fly. This made the pink-haired girl furious that he would ignore her like she was unimportant. In her fit of rage, she quickly pulled out a kunai from her thigh holster and lunged at Naruto with the intent to kill. Unfortunately for her, she made the biggest mistake doing so. Just as Naruto reached the entrance door, he felt his blood surge through his circulatory system, awakening his dormant and suppressed strength, senses, and reflexes. Like unlocking the chains to a raging beast. Just in time to twist himself around and dart his hand to intercept Sakura's attack. Grasping the armed appendage and twisted the arm with quick and proficient cruelty, the arm snapping with greater ease than a wishbone. His attack was far from over. Acting on instinct alone, he twisted and pivoted his waist and feet, using the girl's momentum and hurled her into a nearby tree, her back connecting with the bark like limp leather. Naruto snapped himself out of his thoughts he was previously focusing on when he heard a whimper of pain and looked to the source and found Sakura on her side while her back was arched in very unhealthy angle, her right arm broken and fractured in various places along the said appendage. Tears were flowing down from the corners of her eyes, pooling into the soil beneath her while her expression was agape in silent agony. Naruto sighed. As much as he wanted to leave that stupid girl where she was, she'd just make up a story with her parents and say he beat her without reason and oh so conveniently leave out the details of her assaulting him. He sighed once more as he knew the girl would make up some story to get him in trouble regardless of helping her or not, but good nature got the better of him somehow. Oh well, he thought dryly, may as well do one good deed for someone, even if for a selfish child like her. Ignoring the astonished and gaping looks the majority of the field occupants held, Naruto reached Sakura's shuddering form by her head and shoulders and whispered into her ear. Your back will snap unless your muscles relax, but since you're experiencing a nerve-induced shock, I'll need to force your spine into a straight angle. It will hurt only for a moment, but you'll relax soon after and the pain will lessen. I'm sure you have no broken ribs or internal injuries, so you're not in mortal danger. I'll do this as quickly as I can, so nod to tell me if or when you're ready. Under a moment's hesitation, Sakura nodded. She was in so much pain she clenched her eyes and jaws together almost painfully in an attempt to lessen the agony. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. An ear-piercing scream followed the rapid succession of audible bones snapping into position. Iruka sighed as he graded the class students' papers. He was currently stationed at his desk in his classroom, having to stay behind as all the pre-genins had to return to their homes, which was hours ago. Their assignment was a written test to judge how well one could cooperate with someone else or others to solve the trial demanded. The majority of the students tried but failed to write elaborate methods of going offensive against their enemies with aid of their partner shinobi and setting silly traps inspired by childish imagination. Others just wrote of different methods of escape and retreat. Iruka, who was not very favorable to a tactical retreat, knew that is what many shinobi are required to prevent being ambushed, captured, tortured, interrogated, to recover one's ground, and/or staying within reach of allies for help if or when needed. The scar-faced Chunin leaned back in his chair to relieve some tension from his back and neck muscles, popping it as he did so and peered out the window to his left. The sun was setting and he hadn't yet finished grading his students' tests, so he quickly gathered the test papers and left the class for home. Only a select few had even written reasonably good and well-thought methods of tactical retreat and ambush. Among them were, naturally, Sasuke, Shino, Shikamaru, Kiba, Hinata, and surprisingly Naruto, who was only average in class grades. Curiosity piqued Iruka's musings, wondering whether or not if Naruto actually held himself back in class. It did seem plausible, what with his tendency to avoid gaining attention to himself and with his tests having difficult questions answered while most of the easy ones would be left alone. This scenario test confirmed his suspicions. The second stage of the Genin graduation was tomorrow, and he and Mizuki were the judges to determine the performances of the students' basic jutsus. Usually every year, the Genin exam consisted of 2 stages with the Chunin sensei's marks for approval in the academy. Basics a Genin is required to learn, and a Junin cell leader having the final say in response to the assembled team's ability to work together. This year, to promote better students that were possibly more reliable to a team, a third part was added to the examination. Along his trek home in one of the vacant streets, Iruka thought back to his most interesting student, Naruto. It was immediately after the recess hour was over and he received some strange news that Naruto had, without looking, immobilized, temporarily crippled, and helped the Haruno girl after she had attempted to stab the Uzumaki boy in the back after they exchanged insults. Sakura had denied that she attacked Naruto and said he should be punished for injuring her. What made Iruka the most upset and disappointed with Sakura was not only her unprovoked attack, but her desperate attempts of lies she handed him, saying Naruto attacked her without warning and threw her against a tree. Every student in class said she had jumped at him after Naruto called her a brat and he only countered her assault. Hinata had even said the whole incident in vivid detail, word for word, and didn't even stutter once, since her resolve to see the Haruno girl punished prevailed over her shy nature. Iruka sighed once more in exasperation and his face hardened when he remembered having to listen to that Haruno girl's lies. It was like trying to swallow mud and not spit it back at the mud server. If that girl couldn't accept the consequences of her own actions, then she didn't deserve to be a shinobi. Iruka had finally got to his house and almost dropped on his bed when he reached his bedroom. He changed in some lighter cloths and fell asleep as soon as his head touched the pillow. Morning came and went like the wind and Sarutobi was beginning to consider immediate retirement to spare him from getting arthritis with all the writing he had to do to reduce the mountains of paperwork that piled periodically on his table every hour. Without a doubt, today was perhaps his worst in over a decade. It was slightly past noon, and he remembered vividly the meeting he had with the Haruno woman who just wouldn't shut up. Apparently, her daughter had been injured because Naruto had attacked her brutally and broke her arm in several places. Sarutobi had decided to ignore her and her rants. He had already heard the details of the incident from Iruka yesterday, and the majority of the student witnesses swore that Sakura had attacked first and Naruto only defended himself, if rather extremely. The rants had lasted for over 5 minutes and the woman began calling Naruto a heartless monster and a demon child, which only served to make the Hokage's temper rise to the boiling point. Sarutobi liked the boy for how he was and had great sympathy for him for how long he was forced to suffer people's ridicules and harsh treatment. Sarutobi decided enough was enough and had discreetly told the Haruno woman if she wanted to talk and curse demons, she could do it in Ibiki's private office for a whole week. He had never seen anyone in his life jump to the door of his office as quickly as the woman had and was secretly glad to have someone as sadistic as Ibiki part of his special forces. The benefits were incredible. After another hour of writing, Sarutobi was finally on the last small pile of paperwork. His thoughts and focus wandered to the young blonde. The Hokage had little doubt that Naruto had passed with flying colors, but the real, trying ordeals were going to be far more difficult than performing basic jutsus. Iruka had earlier dropped off the test papers to the Hokage's office and the team matchups were perfect for each other, someone's strength supporting for another's weakness. Now, who would be with whom? Naruto was panting heavily as made his way into the cabin clearing Mizuki had mentioned hours ago. A single wooden shack stood absent amongst the trees and the uprooted soil, the trees as tall as the village's highest buildings and some even taller. No one was there, no Mizuki. Naruto groaned as he strained hefting his new cargo, the Forbidden Scroll. During midday, Naruto had been walking to his apartment in Hollow Days with his new Hitai 8 wrapped around his forehead. Iruka-sensei had given it to him after Naruto had successfully proved his skills in academy jutsu and basic combat knowledge. The fighting forms, accuracy with weapon throwing, and executing henge, disguise, bunshin, clone, and kawamari, replacement, with excellent ease. Iruka had happily given the blonde his new Hitai 8 and Naruto had left with a small thank you to Iruka upon leaving for his home. Mizuki had appeared behind the blonde a short distance away from the academy building and told Naruto the task the Hokage had planned exclusively for him that would test his skills and trustworthiness for the genin rank. Retrieve the scroll in the Hokage's vault that had been titled, Forbidden, on its side and not to look in it until Mizuki arrived. Naruto, who was still too deep in his depression to think more into the issue, accepted quietly with a small nod and Mizuki left in a puff of smoke, leaving behind the directions of where to go after he had the scroll in his possession. Almost 4 hours later, the blonde was atop the Hokage Monument's cliff, gazing down at the silent city that amassed thousands of denizens, if not more. Without a moment's delay, he jumped off the cliff a good several meters before gravity gripped him and pulled him toward the earth. Moving with practiced fluidity, Naruto had managed to spin and pivoted his falling form quickly enough to launch his 2 kunai in hand in opposite directions, the knives embedding into the wood and rock material of the buildings with secure strength. The garrote wire laced between the knife handle rings served as the slingshot and propelled the young shinobi far toward the highest building after landing on the wire effortlessly with his weighted sandals. His landing was as silent and graceful as his movements and he deftly slipped into the top floor window, panning left and right to ensure no one saw or heard him. Seeing no one, he transformed into a brown lizard and scaled along the ceiling to avoid anyone catching sight of him. His natural color served as excellent camouflage and hid him well, and within a few moments, he had the scroll in hand and made a mad dash to the forest while staying in the shadows. And here he was, in the forest, reading the Forbidden Scroll as he grew bored with waiting for Mizuki to show up. Naruto had read over half of the scroll's techniques and discovered too late that Mizuki had lied to him about this exclusive task the Hokage had assigned him. The Hokage would never be so careless as to use a scroll containing so many jutsus just for a graduation exercise. This was only a trap for the Chunin to kill off the vessel and take the scroll for himself, and he fell for it like an amateur because of his carelessness. It doesn't matter now, Naruto thought. Mizuki has already told the Hokage and the village of what I've done, and no one would believe me if I told them it was Mizuki who set me up. They'd accept any excuse to have me killed, imprisoned or have me thrown out of the village. I may as well train with some of the jutsus in the scroll I had read already while I wait for Mizuki to show up. He'll be here soon and kill me and take the scroll. Finishing his thoughts, he began his practice with the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, shadow clone technique. Iruka's breath was ragged, he was sweating buckets of water, and he was utterly exhausted, but he managed to reach Naruto before anyone else did, which was a blessing since the search party sent were out for blood, so to speak. Iruka jumped into the cabin clearing, and gaped in astonishment. Every tree surrounding the clearing had countless gashes embedded along their trunks' surfaces. Fragmented and splintering portions of tree wood littered the ground in large pieces. The ground was covered in potholes and thousands of leaves blanketed the soil. "Hello, Iruka-sensei." Iruka gasped and whirled around to face the unknown speaker. He didn't even sense any presence, and this person spoke with such calmness it was both eerie and unnerving. When he didn't see anyone behind him, he thought his mind was playing tricks on him, but that thought died when he saw a silhouetted figure stand beside the cabin wall, hidden within the shade, and had a cylinder-shaped object in his right hand shaped like a scroll. Iruka couldn't see any defined details but began fearing the worst when he noted the figure's height was equal to his blonde student's. His dark, almost glowing blue eyes confirmed his fears. It was Naruto. The said blonde stepped slowly out of the shadows, a fierce scowl marring his features. His clothes were dirty with grim and dirt and supported numerous cuts and tears. He had been training quite harshly for the last hour. Shakily, Iruka cleared his throat and prayed to Kami that his student wouldn't kill him. Naruto-kun, do you know what's going on? As if awakened from a trance, Naruto's features softened somewhat and held a more neutral visage. His gaze was hollow as before. "Yes," he said, "the Hokage has sent a search party for me after hearing that I stole the forbidden scroll. You are here, also, for that reason." His tone was flat, dead, as if the life from his body had left him like blood from an open wound. This couldn't be his determined student who he admired for his strength before. Iruka wanted to touch his student's shoulder and console him for whatever troubles he was facing, but was stopped when the young blonde told the scar-faced Chunin to stay back. He did. Naruto raised his sights to the treetops with a distant look in his eyes. "Mizuki should be here any moment now," he said suddenly. "He'll come to kill me, take the scroll and leave the Fire Country border while the search party sent look for me, or my corpse." Iruka was now visibly trembling in agape horror to his student's voice. He talked as if he would accept death wholeheartedly. Naruto's gaze turned to his stunned sensei and held a look akin to perhaps regret. "Iruka-sensei. Thank you very much for your kindness, even though you must hate me in truth for being the Kyuubi no Kitsune." Iruka flinched slightly hearing this, "but that kindness is what kept me at peace, despite my suffering living in that village where I was seen only as monster." His tears dripped from his eyes, but his voice held steady and smiled sadly. "When in death, I'll remember you always for what you've done for me, even when you never had to. So goodbye, and I pray you live through this and remember to visit Ichiraku Jiji and Ayame-chan for me. I wouldn't want them to run out of business because of my absence." Iruka was now sobbing softly and didn't care if the whole world laughed at him for it. His student, who he thought of as a younger brother, maybe even as a son, was talking about dying, and he had the heart to tell him how much he was thankful for the kindness he gave only because he truly did care for the blonde. He knew the demon inside of him was locked away and the boy before him was a completely different person. Before he could do anything to tell his pupil he didn't have to do anything rash. The forbidden scroll was thrown into his midsection and fell onto his back after hearing the sounds of multiple objects hitting the wall space he had previously occupied. By the time he got on his feet, Iruka inspected the wall and found it covered in shuriken and kunai knives and panned quickly to Naruto, who had managed to save his life. The said blonde's focus was not on Iruka, but on Mizuki, was perched in a crouching position on a high tree limb with two Fuma shuriken fastened to his back. "I don't know how you managed to find Naruto first, Iruka, but that doesn't matter anymore. If you would be so kind as to give me that scroll, I'll spare your life." His tone was completely mocking and sneering, as if he had the teacher and student at his mercy. Iruka growled and was about to run forward and attack him, but Naruto whispered something to him. "Run, Iruka-sensei." I'll stall him so you can get that scroll and yourself in the village. Sarutobi Gigi can handle the rest once you tell him about Mizuki. Please hurry. But, Naruto-kun, Iruka-sensei, please. I can't return to the village now because of my crimes, despite it being an orchestration from Mizuki, and the people of Konoha wouldn't believe me if I told them the truth. Please. I don't want one of the few people that are dear to me die because of me or getting involved with my issues of my own carelessness. Iruka would have refused immediately at that notion, but Naruto's pleading eyes made him do as he was asked and took off in a desperate run to the village, unaware that he had saved himself from being struck by Mizuki's massive shuriken when he broke into his sprint. Mizuki cursed as he missed his target and couldn't afford chase, so he opted to have his sadistic fun with the demon. He turned to Naruto and gave cruel smile before speaking. I'm surprised that you allowed Iruka to escape, you useless demon. You had the scroll in your possession and you literally threw it to him without a second thought. Naruto remained impassive, but his assumptions were right before Mizuki attacked. He had been watching them when they were exchanging words before and heard everything Naruto had said. And now he had no reason to delay anything to discuss his origins, but that didn't stop Mizuki from enjoying Naruto's torment at his expense. It's a shame that I couldn't tell you myself before I killed you, but I guess life's full of disappointments, eh? I suppose you would prefer death instead of living because you know now that no one would care about you and hate you for the rest of your blasphemous life. Don't worry, I kill you nice and quickly, so stand still for me. After he finished taunting him, Mizuki unclipped his last Fuma shuriken from his back and launched the weapon at a blurring speed toward the blonde statue still form that looked on calmly at the object that would soon remove him from this world. Naruto watched everything in vivid detail, from the surrounding rustles of the forest's trees to even the most minuscule scratches on the Fuma shuriken fast approaching him. He didn't move from his spot, or rather he didn't want to move, too tired of having to simply live as an abomination and seen as a monster. A quick death seemed to be a blessing for him. The Fuma shuriken suddenly seemed to falter in its progress and slowed down to a complete stop inches from his face, his surroundings slowing to a stop. Everything was in a standstill and nothing moved. He felt his awareness slipping, a feeling similar to losing consciousness, and witnessed the whole world around him dim, seeming to become swallowed by darkness. The black abyss was vast, stretching far beyond his limits of scope, but then again it was darkness after all. Darkness concealed, it never was simply vastness or empty space. Strangely, he could see himself perfectly, the color and detail of his cloths an incredible contrast to his present surroundings. Where was he? Where am I? He said, his voice sounding more like a speech of thought. What's going on? We are in your mind, spoke a deep rumbling voice. Naruto jumped slightly and intended to search for the source of the voice, but stopped himself when realizing the futility in searching for something in pitch blackness. He blinked suddenly and gasped sharply in surprise when he registered his surroundings changed instantly from endless black that wisped away instantly when two torches lit themselves by some strange force. Naruto took in the detail of his new environment. He was now in an enormous rectangular chamber, two torches being the only assortments on the bare sandy-colored walls. The whole floor was flooded with some salty liquid that had the young blonde thinking better of knowing what it was exactly and continued his inspection. On the opposite end of the chamber stood two towering bar doors with a paper seal on the joining locks. Behind the doors was nothing but shadows. Curious, Naruto walked toward the double iron doors and squinted slightly to peer in the shadows to make out what the darkness was hiding. A silhouetted mass moved about slightly and shifted itself, its many tails gracefully swooshing while it advanced to the prison doors. Naruto gaped in wonder and somewhat fear. There above him the very demon of legend stood tall and proud, its crimson coat of fur resembling armor molded from the very blood of his enemies. The Kyuubi no Kitsune. It was indeed a monster of both fear and reverence. Its 9 tails whipped against the inner walls of its confinement while its whipcord muscle and sinew rippled and twitched every so often beneath its blood-red fur. Its skull was dome-shaped with a pair of long pointed ears and a broad and short snout, giving the beast greater jaw strength. Its crimson eyes, rimmed with black fur that tapered into the curve of its ears, looked down at the marginally smaller form with a searching gaze, trying to find something it had sought for once before, but no longer seen. Naruto gasped, but couldn't finish his statement. Yes, my little kit. It is I, the Kyuubi no Kitsune, The very demon of legend that purged your village into ruins over a decade ago. I've been quite anxious to meet you in person. Or should I say up close, with me being not human or mortal. Either way, that means little difference at the moment. It's a pleasure to finally meet my vessel. Naruto pinched his cheek to make sure he wasn't dreaming, feeling the sharp pain race through his skin that made him wince slightly and silently confirmed he was in no dream. Questions swam through his mind instantly, demanding to be answered and quickly. How could the demon itself be inside of him if it were so large? Why hadn't he noticed it for so long? Wasn't he supposed to be the demon himself? Where was he at that moment? Did the Kyuubi bring him here? So many questions flew through his thoughts, too quickly to follow, and began to develop a severe headache with a dull throbbing in his temples. He tried to calm his excitement by breathing deeply and slowly, focusing on slowing his rushing blood. Once his adrenaline had calmed, his face became stern and looked the demon directly into its glowing red eyes with a piercing resolve to demand for the answers he sought for. Strangely, the fox grinned in response to his glaring look. I demand some answers from you, and I'm not leaving peacefully until I have them answered. Do we have an understanding? The Kyuubi nodded. Good. First off, where are we exactly? I've never seen or heard of a place like this in all of Konoha. The Kyuubi was quick to answer. As I said before, we are in your mind. This chamber is actually part of the seal that merges with your mind. The seal I'm referring to is the spiral seal on your belly, seen only when your chakra is concentrated through your body. Any other questions? If Naruto didn't know any better, he could swear amusement was brimmed in the fox's words, like a sage eager to tell a wise story to show his wisdom. Second, why haven't I noticed you until recently before I discovered it myself? On that topic, why the hell did you, and I know it was you, make my belly erupt in pain? I damn near tore my abdominals just out of reflex from the pain. To this, the Kyuubi smiled mischievously, but sheepishly. To answer why you haven't noticed my presence is simple. The spiral seal prevents me from contacting you and allowing my chakra from freely going through your body. Demonic chakra such as mine is quite coarse and harmful, even dangerous humans, unless they were exposed to it for an extended period of time and strengthen the internal constitution by adapting to it, such as you for example, having been my vessel for almost 13 years after all. As for why you were in pain, I confess, that Haruno bitch's statement of my defeat had irked me severely, making me release my energy out of anger to relieve my frustration. I had no idea that it would affect you, believe me. Naruto gave himself a quick chuckle from the demon's reference to Sakura. Even demons thought of her as a bitch. His humor died when he remembered Mizuki's Fuma Shuriken and how it had stopped. He was about to question if he was already dead with the Fuma Shuriken so close to him when he was pulled into the recesses of his mind, but remembered that if he was dead, then so would the Kyuubi. It was simple instinct that told him this, but it was without doubt unquestionable. Besides, what did it matter if he died anyway? He had wanted a death over living any longer in that oppressive village, having discovered why he was hated. He dropped the thought and resumed his questioning. An untold number of minutes passed as Naruto continued asking his questions, all managing to be answered until his next question was asked. Why did you bring me here? Why do you prevent my death from happening? I want to know. The Kyuubi was silent for a long time and seemed to hold an air of solemnness, but was quickly replaced with a determined atmosphere that perpetuated around him and hardened his features, baring his jagged fangs, and crouched low enough to look his vessel in the eyes. His gaze was clearly perturbing. I brought you here to convince you not to seek suicide and death so easily. Especially after just a silly revelation. Silly. Naruto yelled to the demon in fury, his face a mask of loathing and suppressed hatred. You think having discovered you're hated mercilessly and treated like shit for over a decade because of being nothing more than a monster in the eyes of the villagers is silly. Don't you dare mock the pain I've suffered through as though it were something easily handled. Well, guess the fuck what, you damn demon. I've never had a single good memory throughout the whole of my lifetime, and I've had nothing to live for. I have no friends, no family, the village scorns me because of you. I live almost like a hunted animal and wounded beggar. And now you're demanding I stay alive just so you could survive a little while longer while I continue to suffer the torment of never finding peace. Well then, if you have any convincing reasons as to why I should live a life of shit, tell me then, Kyuubi. What do I have left in this world to live for? Like a bottomless moat, Naruto's final cry reverberated throughout the cavern. echoing like a distant memory before disappearing into the void that carries sound to limbo. The Kyuubi's eyes that had once been vicious and threatening were now downcast, but only for a moment, and hardened his features once again and leered down on his vessel with evident distaste and reproach, lifting himself up until he towered over the young blonde. His voice was cold and growling. "You mean to tell me that all the people that have cared for you mean so little that you don't even acknowledge them as part of your life? What of those two at the ramen stand you frequently visit? Ayame and Ichiraku? Have they not always supported you regardless of what your dreams or intentions were?" Naruto's eyes became hurtful after realizing he had neglected considering the ramen stand family, having known them for so long that they had become close friends to him. Shame washed over him like a waterfall. "And what of Sarutobi?" Kyuubi continued. "Has he not always lent an ear to hear of your troubles and help you when you needed help most when younger? Will you forget everything he has done for you out of the kindness of his old heart? I may be a demon, but even I have a sense of repaying a debt and acknowledging a favor from someone close. At least he was honest in caring for you." Naruto's eyes looked even more pained, his hands shaking from the tremor racking through him as his shame was almost becoming unbearable. "And your sensei, Iruka? Does he mean nothing to you when he has been like an older brother to you when you had no one? Does his understanding of you being not I mean so little that you would pass it off like an afterthought? If there's anything that you ought to be upset for, it's being a fool and drowning yourself in training and pitying yourself in your depression to ignore everything and everyone around you. You should be ashamed of yourself for thinking that death is the only way out, because it isn't. It's only the easy way, the coward's way out. What happened to your determination that you possessed for so long that you wanted nothing more than strength? Your resolve means nothing, doesn't it?" Naruto had listened to everything, letting the tears slowly slide down his cheeks. "Let me tell you right now, despite that you don't need my words to know this, but life is hard. In fact, it's an ever-fickle bitch that would easily stab you in the back the instant you turn away from it. There's no such thing as the easy life. But don't you dare think that you are alone in suffering. Just get over it already. If there's one thing I know for certain, it's that there's never a reason to die out of depression. True strength comes from never giving up. Pain and struggle are the best teachers one can hope for. Experience hones your ability. You have all that and more, so don't give in to accepting death with an open invitation. Don't let all your efforts be in vain. And if you must know..." The Kyuubi paused, trying to find the best way to address the statement, and continued, "You're loved for. Deeply in fact. There's someone out there in the village that would sooner die after hearing of your death than continuing to live without you in her vision. You don't have to believe me, but I've seen how she looks at you." Naruto ceased all movements after hearing this revelation. Someone actually loved him? Deeply enough that she would commit suicide than to be without him, and he had never noticed her? Who? Naruto eyed the demon warily and asked who she was. All that he was answered to was a smug Cheshire cat grin that threatened to split the fox's head in two, suggestively raising his eyebrows perversely. The Kyuubi only gave a few vague hints that didn't seem to make sense to the young shinobi. The girl was strong, beautiful, kind, shy, and had admired him from afar for the better part of his life. Renewed strength and resolve burned inside of him after realizing everything the Kyuubi said was right. If he did die, that would mean that all his efforts would have been for naught. And hearing the villagers' gloats only spurred Naruto's rage for them. He shouldn't give a damn about the villagers' views of him. He had given up trying to gain their acknowledgement long ago and preferred to keep it that way. He wasn't alone, despite not having any family, and he couldn't just selfishly abandon them after everything they had done for him. They were important to him, and he had only himself to blame for feeling lonely when he never had been. And he wanted to see who it was that could care for him as deeply as Kyuubi had told him for himself. As selfish as it was, he didn't give a damn that moment. A sudden pulling sensation gripped Naruto and dragged him away from the chamber confines, a feeling like being dragged to the surface of water after being submerged. Before he left the cavern chamber completely, Kyuubi's rumbling voice reached him through the growing darkness. "Never forget what I've told you, kid, and remember these final words as your ordeals may come. One life to live. Remember the past, fight for the present, live for the future. Never depend on hope, for hope won't carry your feet. Never regret and never forsake what is precious to you. And should your body ever fail, never let your mind and spirit break, for they are your only true untakeable possessions you have. Always stay strong and cherish all you have with all your heart, because nothing lasts forever. Remember these words, and I'll watch you from the darkness with a smile to remember your renewed resolve. You have my blessings, Baka Kit. A ghost of a smile crept to Naruto's lips, taking in the demon's final message to him and committing to his memory preciously. Feeling up for a little rebuttal, he whispered a few silent words that Kyuubi had easily caught with his heightened hearing before his vessel disappeared from sight completely. I'll be back again, Baka Kitsune. A toothy smile matted itself on the Kyuubi's snout, a chuckle escaping his throat at the absurdity of some human actually playfully trading insults with him of all beings. The notion was strangely comforting, even when his vessel had long since left the chamber, silence becoming the beast's only company once more. Mizuki watched with sickly satisfying glee as the shuriken drew closer with every passing second on the blonde vessel, doubtless of any resistance the young genin could do if he had second thoughts. Too late for those now. The shuriken was barely a foot away from impacting the boy's head. Naruto suddenly twitched and the shuriken shattered. Mizuki watched with stunned amazement as he witnessed, for a brief instant, Naruto executing over 10 hand seals into the blink of an eye and the leaves surrounding him cut through his throwing weapon like paper, spinning in a dome fashion around the young blonde with an impervious wall of razor-sharp moving blades of foliage. When the veil of leaves finally subsided in their rotation, Naruto was nowhere to be seen. Mizuki frantically searched for the demon vessel while grasping a kunai in hand, panning left and right, darting his sights up and down and behind himself. Naruto was gone, but how? He couldn't have simply vanished, nor could he move so quickly as to evade sight. He was probably hiding, but where? Looking for me, Mizuki Teme, said a voice from the tree canopy above the said Chunin. Mizuki didn't bother turning around to face his target, far too intent on simply killing the blonde so to escape without much notice, though futile that thought as he clearly forgot Iruka had escaped with the scroll and was now telling the Hokage what had transpired only moments ago. He let loose a series of kunais toward the canopy in effort to strike the blonde. All that he heard a second later was a pop. Baffled, he pivoted himself around in every direction he could think of but halted his search when he found Naruto charging him from a distance, unarmed. Mizuki laughed and chucked several kunai in the boy's direction and saw all the knives make contact with him and exploded into smoke and dust. Before he could question what had happened, he was surrounded by 6 orange-clothed bodies, poised and ready for the finishing blow. Then it hit him, literally. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, his last thought before all the clones launched their assaults. 2 from behind kicked Mizuki's legs outward from the joints, breaking the ligaments in the process and forcing him to fall to ground, where 3 in the front sent their knees straight into the man's chin, hurling him into the air where the final body was waiting and delivered the final blow to the head with neck-snapping force. Mizuki was left paralyzed as he made contact with the solid earth. Mizuki groaned and twitched with unspoken agony. He couldn't move any part of his body and his legs were perhaps beyond healing. The pain was indefinable and he couldn't even manage to scream away his pain. Naruto released his clones and approached Mizuki's prone form with a calm stride, stopping only a foot's distance away and knelt to look the man in the eye with a vicious scowl. "Just so you know," Naruto said with a bored tone, "I've changed my mind. I won't die just yet, and I won't allow scum like you to take my life. And before you ask, I'm not going to kill you. I'm taking you to Hokage Gigi and, well, let's just say it'll be none too pleasant. Oh, that's right. I really want to thank you for taking so long in rendezvousing with me in the forest. Because of your lateness, I had read a great portion of the Forbidden Scroll and now I have a photographic memory of all the techniques I've read. The Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Art of the Shadow Clone, was only one of those techniques, as well as that Kumasora ha Gufu, Razorleaf Tornado. Amazing jutsus, nay? Mizuki could say nothing as he gaped in disbelief at this information. Before he could consider those words were but lies, he was picked up and hauled over Naruto's shoulder, grunting painfully as the position was not favorable to his injuries. Without missing a beat, Naruto leapt off to the village's direction with Mizuki at wind-blurring speed. Naruto had no regrets. If he was punished, he would accept that. Now he had nothing to fear or feel worry. He was content. The next day, Naruto was sitting in his seat in class, resting his head on the desk as he was very tired from last night's events. It was immediately as he reached the village walls that the Hokage and his Anbu guards intercepted him with Mizuki over his shoulder, and the old man had said he heard all the information from Iruka of what had happened prior to a few hours ago at the time. Mizuki was taken by Anbu and carried off to one of the shinobi interrogators, and Naruto had been cleared of all charges and was congratulated for apprehending the Chunin so expertly. Naruto prided himself with what strength he had that could deliver such damage to enemies. He was dismissed soon after he was relieved of his temporary cargo, and Iruka had asked the blonde if he would like to join him for ramen. Naruto happily accepted. The two had talked for over an hour as they ate, strengthening the bond they shared before and making it stronger through their understanding of Naruto's history and his past. Iruka had been rather upset to hear what his student had told him, but that was only the lesser portion of Naruto's bad history experiences. Until he felt the time was right, Naruto had no intention of telling his sensei of one particular incident that had happened over 4 years ago or his discussion with the Kyuubi. That would have to wait for another time. Today, every passing student with Hitai Ates were going to be put in 3-man groups, or teams, with one Junin sensei that would act as the team leader and commander. Iruka had started announcing the team assemblies only moments ago, and Naruto was more than a little hopeful he wouldn't be paired with that Haruno girl. Team 7 will be Uzumaki Naruto, Haruno Sakura, and Uchiha Sasuke. Damn, shot down before he even left the ground. As much as he wanted to object to the matchups, Naruto knew it would do nothing but waste effort. Curious of his new teammates' reactions, he panned his sights on Sakura and wished a second later he hadn't. Sakura was visibly seething and had a murderous aura coming off her that was felt by everyone within an arm's reach, and slowly backed away. She turned to his direction and scowled with all the hate she could muster in hopes of harming the blonde with her gaze alone, which sadly for her, was futile. Naruto ignored her and looked to the Uchiha's direction. The said genin was, as usual, brooding with his hands folded across his face and looked to Naruto's direction, meeting his gaze with his own. Only a second later he turned away, seeming as if he didn't care for the matchups one way or another. From what Naruto had managed to overhear above the jealous accusations many of the females in the class threw to Sakura's direction because of her being paired with Sasuke, Ino, Shikamaru, and Choji comprised Team 10, and Kiba, Shino and Hinata made up Team 8. There were a total of 10 teams in all, 3 genin per group, but Naruto didn't bother paying attention to the others. If anyone in the class would manage to solidify their ranks, Teams 7, 8 and 10 would manage. After Iruka said his congratulations and respects, he left to meet with Sarutobi, leaving one final announcement that Team Junin captains would come to pick up the selected teams. 2 hours had passed and all the genin teams were picked up by their Junin senseis. All but Team 7. Naruto had grown bored over an hour ago prior to their wait and opted to have a nap until their new sensei arrived, having been very tired from last night's events and managed to get little sleep. Sakura was occupying herself by watching and fawning over the ever-brooding Sasuke in hopes of receiving his affections. Her arm was left in a sling after being broken, and the medic employees told her she would have to refrain from any hard activities for 2 weeks until the arm had finished healing. Sasuke was exercising his patience, which he seemed to have in abundance. Finally, after 2.5 hours, their Junin sensei arrived, casually giving excuses as to explain his tardiness. Naruto had awoken from the noise of hearing someone's casual, though somewhat loud voice breaking him off from his sleep, though he was a rather light sleeper, never willing to allow his guard to falter if in the case of a possible attempt on his life, and did a visual inspection of the man. He had gray spiky hair, a Hitai 8 fastened over his left eye, a black mask covering the lower half of his face, and a Junin uniform, green flak vest, black bodysuit, black trousers with bandaged legs and metal-plated fingerless gloves. "Konnichiwa, genins," he said, "I'm your new sensei and you must be my new team. Come to the rooftop and we'll introduce ourselves properly." Even though Naruto, Sakura and Sasuke were rather upset at hearing the man's aloofness and his own tardiness, they followed the Junin to the rooftop, where they found him sitting down and waiting for the genin to have a seat. Once they did, the Junin introduced himself. "My name is Hitaki Kakashi. Since I'm your new teacher and commander, I'll need to know what I can about you all and what you like. You know, likes, dislikes, dreams for the future, that sort of thing." Sakura raised her hand, getting Kakashi's attention. Why don't you do what you said so we get a better idea to introduce ourselves? After all, we don't know anything about you, sensei. Me? Well, my name is Kakashi, I'm sure you know, and my likes and dislikes are none of your business. Dreams for the future. Well, I have hobbies. How absolutely laughable, Naruto thought. The only thing we know about the windbag is his name, and he has the gall to say what isn't our business when he expects us to tell him about ourselves and doesn't even give an apology for making us wait? Oh, I'm going to give him an introduction, he won't soon forget. Sakura and Sasuke shared similar thoughts on Kakashi's introduction. Sakura, deciding to move things along, began introducing herself. I'm Haruno Sakura. She looks at Sasuke and blushes. And I hate Naruto and Ino. If she was trying to upset Naruto, it hadn't worked. At all. My dreams for the future is I want to get married to. She looks at Sasuke again and blushes. My hobbies are. Amidst the things she described from that point, the males from Team 7 groaned and tuned her out, all thinking along the same lines that the girl needed new hobbies other than accessorizing and posing in a mirror or collecting new tacky cloths. When she finished, Kakashi motioned to Naruto to do the same. My name's Uzumaki Naruto. I like to be active and train, and I love eating ramen. I hate the 3-minute wait it takes to cook the ramen and weak little brats that use excuses to justify their weakness. He said this last part and looked to Sakura's direction, fully intending to get his point across, which it did with Sakura glaring venomously at him, and I have no real hobbies. My dream is rather personal, so I won't divulge it. He received a few stares which he silently challenged by raising an eyebrow, as if saying, you have a problem with that, and waited for the Uchiha to begin his introduction. I'm Uchiha Sasuke. There are plenty of things that I don't like and even less that I do consider likable. I don't have any hobbies, I'm too busy training to have any. Dreams are for the weak, but I do have an ambition. To kill the man that destroyed my clan in cold blood. Everyone that heard this had varying reactions. Naruto felt irritation for the Uchiha. Haven't heard too many times to count about how he became an Avenger while Sakura fawned over his coolness with a longing gaze, and Kakashi had a troubled expression of hearing his words, fearing the boy was becoming bloodthirsty and hungry for killing. Kakashi coughed to get the genin's attention. Alright everyone, now that that's over with, I want you to meet me at Field 14 tomorrow at around 7 AM and don't eat or else you'll throw up. We're going to have a survival exercise and I want you all to be ready for the challenge. Before anyone could ask questions, Kakashi continued. Before you ask, this isn't a regular exercise that you all have done in the academy. You see, this year, as many before, we assemble as many 3-man teams as possible and reduce the possible graduates to a third of the total students. In other words, only 33% of all the students in the academy pass with a legitimate genin rank while the rest are sent back to the academy for further training. Basically, only 3 teams can pass and it's up to the assigned Junin to decide whether or not you're suitable for becoming genins. See you tomorrow, rookies. And with that he left in a puff of smoke. Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura shared brief glances at one another before they all headed for their homes, fully intending to deliver payback to the damnable, irresponsible Junin they all grew to dislike. Naruto's thoughts were on what methods to properly punish Kakashi during their survival exercise and began making a mental list as the possibilities were expanding. A devilish smirk graced his lips as he neared his home. Say your prayers, Kakashi, he thought with a sadistic tremble. 'Cause as soon as you and I meet, you won't even have time to confess your regrets. Kakashi was not going to be happy tomorrow. It felt hot. No, hot could never compare to the feeling that enveloped his body and senses. He felt like his skin was boiling and his breath was fire in his lungs. His muscles felt sore to the point of snapping and his bones felt as if they had long since been reduced to dust, the supports to his body caring not of their possible absence. Sight, sound, smell, taste and touch. Heightened to the point of near perfection. It was almost overwhelming to him, but he ignored it. He was dimly aware of a thick hot liquid pouring out of his mouth and pooling beneath his feet and a crimson mist of some strange energy accumulating and rushing through his body, but paid it no mind when the objects, or rather, subjects of his attention were before his eyes. Their once sneering faces now filled with looks of abject horror and an unmistakable fear. A feeling of fear that was palpable to the taste. A taste he found delicious. The 2 men before him were Chunins, no more than newly promoted, and were rather young considering their rank. Perhaps late teens or very early 20s. He didn't care. He was going to kill them either way, just as he had did with their partners that now lay as corpses around him in a circle of dead bodies. All of them were Chunin, maybe some older genin, but all the same, they would suffer for what they had almost done. The two remaining Chunins warily gripped their kunais, as if the action could calm them and make them feel a little at ease. A foolish attempt. He felt no sympathy for them, and would only laugh as he watched them slowly die in his grasp. Before either of the two Chunin could bat a breath, he disappeared and came from under the Chunin's blind spot closest to him. The Chunin wasn't able to make a sound before his throat was ripped from under his chin. Blood splashed against the leaves and trunks of the surrounding bushes and trees that encompassed the forest they were currently in. The Chunin stood rigid for a moment before collapsing, blood loss taking its pricey toll. The last Chunin did a double take and took off at a frantic speed for safety into the depths of the forest in hopes of escaping the young abomination that killed over 8 Chunins after seeming to come back to life after their group attack on the boy. The Chunin was gasping and was faltering in his sprint as his strength reserves were diminishing every passing second. He took a quick glance behind himself and stopped altogether and was breathing heavily as he found his hunter hadn't chased him very far. That thought died when a barely audible rustle of leaves was heard and the demon boy came down on the Chunin's gasping form like an unstoppable hammer and crushed the Chunin's head into the ground upon landing on him. The Chunin's body twitched and spasmed for a few seconds until the now headless body lay still. The demon boy lightly ruffled his spiky blonde hair and gazed down on the remains of his kill and felt slightly disappointed in not killing his prey more slowly. The demon boy shifted his gaze to the full red moon that loomed above him as a silent spectator of his doings, his deep crimson eyes piercing through almost the very vastness of the night. Feeling a swell of triumph over the kills he accomplished in this one night, he pulled his head back and howled, roared in vindictive liberation as the feeling of oneness consumed him from the very depths of his soul. Naruto awoke with a start, shooting up from his bed and gasped, sweating profusely from recollecting the vivid details of the dream. No, more like a nightmare he had just witnessed during his sleep. He ran his hand through his sweat-soaked hair and exhaled audibly in an effort to calm his erratic heartbeat that thundered in his ears. He could literally feel his pulse beat against his veins and arteries throughout his body. Naruto took a glimpse at his bed sheets and grimaced in slight disgust. His sheets were soaked with sweat and had various tears in the mattress, most likely from his digging fingers when he was asleep. He quickly grabbed his shinobi clothes and took to the bathroom, removed his white muscle shirt and black boxers and hopped into the shower. He had spent over 10 minutes under the shower's faucet, scrubbing his skin until he was satisfied all the grime and caked sweat was removed. After he finished his cleaning, he dressed in his armor and dark orange jumpsuit and went to his kitchen to make a meal for himself. After his first meeting with his team commanding Junin, Kakashi, Naruto knew without question the man was irresponsible and perhaps made himself late every time he scheduled an appointment, so it was only common sense to eat while he could and not have to wait for the team commander to arrive hours after his appointed time. He finished eating his ramen meal and took off to Field 14 where his team should be gathering at. Along his way to the training fields, his thoughts wandered to the dream he had the night before. He remembered that night, when it happened and what had happened, but much of it was still a blur of images and incomprehensible awareness. He was just about past 8 years old when he had made a late-night detour from Ichiraku's ramen stand through the forest to get to his apartment when only moments later he had found a group of male Chunins approaching a woman who was sobbing quietly in horror of what was about to happen to her. The said woman was trapped by the forest trees and was more or less lacking clothing that somehow managed to preserve her modesty. Naruto didn't understand fully what exactly was happening, but he instinctively knew that woman would get hurt if he did nothing. Beyond that, Naruto couldn't remember anything else what had transpired that night, and he had been covered in blood and his clothes were torn when he had awoken the next morning in his apartment. After re-evaluating what he remembered, he felt himself change his outlook on everything and everyone around him. Rage and hatred filled and brimmed in his soul after finally seeing how much the villagers themselves were more monstrous than most demons depicted in folklore. His thoughts for acceptance from the villagers whisked away and he prepared himself for any possible confrontation by training to his limits. 2 years after that incident, Naruto had finally understood what those Chunin had planned to do to that woman. They were planning to force themselves on her because one Chunin was far too excited after drinking too much sake, and his partners had decided to join the act of having what fun they could have with their victim. Things had apparently gone awry for the Chunin group because the next morning, their bodies were found in the forest after someone had noticed their absence. No one had suspected him, strangely enough, for the villagers were always quick and eager to place something of blame on him, and still to this day, Naruto hadn't heard what had happened to the woman he had perhaps saved. He couldn't even recall a single detail of her appearance, but maybe it was for the better. After all, who would want to be reminded of near-accomplished attempt of rape they had miraculously avoided? Naruto shook his head furiously for a moment to clear his thoughts while he leapt from rooftop to his destination. He shouldn't be having his thoughts focused on barely related matters concerning what happened over 4 years ago. He had a survival exercise to focus on. That, and drawing together a good payback method to give Kakashi for his earlier tardiness. Oh, well, all good things in time. When Naruto had finally reached the training field, only Sasuke was present while Sakura was nowhere in sight, which Naruto was happy for. Most likely because she wasn't a light sleeper and never woke up early in the mornings. As much as he really had nothing personal against the Haruno girl, she just somehow managed to irritate him for how she acted. Thinking herself above others, doing as she pleased because of her spoiled nature, her condescending character and rebuttals. The list could go on and circle the whole village walls twice if he wrote them all down on paper. Still, he couldn't hate Sakura for that. That's how she was raised by her spoiling parents. Naruto pushed those thoughts away and briskly made his way toward the Uchiha, stopping just shy of a few paces away to give the young prodigy some space. The said Uchiha shifted his gaze to his blonde teammate and waited for a response. "Want to spar for a while?" Naruto asked. Sasuke raised an eyebrow at this sudden offer. He shifted himself from his sitting position and stood with his hands in his pockets, holding an air of arrogance that displeased Naruto immensely. Sasuke gave a smirk after a minute of holding his gaze with Naruto's. "Why should I spar with you? You're probably not strong enough to keep up with me if I accepted." His tone was clearly arrogant and condescending, as if he were the best shinobi in Konoha. As much as Naruto wanted to hit the Uchiha over the head in hopes of deflating that big ego of his, why not attack him mentally? It certainly works better in bruising one's pride, and it was longer lasting. Grinning like the cat that ate the canary, Naruto replied in a bored and non-caring voice that dripped with criticism. "I was bored and I thought a little spar with the great Uchiha would be worthwhile, but seeing your hesitance, you probably don't want your pride bruised too badly should you fail to defeat me." As expected, the results were instantaneous. Sasuke visibly scowled and hardened his features while his hands were reaching for his kunai in challenge. "You're going to regret those words, Uzumaki. Prepare yourself." Naruto didn't need to be told twice. His own hands grasped his kunai strapped on both his thighs and crouched in prep for a rushing attack. Sasuke did the same, and the two were left in a standstill, waiting for the other to determine the first action. A stray leaf drifted down in a dancing manner in the air between the two genins. The instant the leaf touched the soil, Naruto launched himself toward his opponent, closing the distance with incredible speed and delivered a heel kick upwards in an attempt to catch him under the chin. Sasuke, though slightly surprised by the Uzumaki's speed, managed to evade the kick by pulling his head back and spun his body to keep himself balanced and sent his own kick towards the blonde's legs, which was avoided by flipping over Sasuke's kick in a corkscrew motion and landed on the ground perfectly, attacking with one of his kunai in hand. Sasuke blocked the attack easily enough with his own kunai, but was unprepared for the blonde suddenly dropping his kunai and grasped Sasuke's hand and pulled with great force that the Uchiha stumbled forward and Naruto slipped behind him and twisted his arm in a submission lock behind his back, and an arm snaked around his neck, preventing him any leverage and slipping from his detained position. Sasuke struggled for a while but fell completely still when he felt the tip of Naruto's kunai touch his throat. "So, do you concede?" Naruto whispered in Sasuke's ear, "or would you like a rematch?" "Your choice." Sasuke was visibly surprised, and very shocked that some other genin, who never seemed to have excelled at anything in the academy, slipped through his guard with such ease to rival an expert. Sasuke would never say aloud, but he was awed in respect towards his teammates' skill. Now he could train with greater fervor and excel beyond his level by leaps and bounds. Best 2 out of 3? Sasuke offered calmly. He didn't have to see or hear his teammates' response before he was immediately released, and both took stances once again after getting some distance between each other. This time, Sasuke took to the offensive and both clashed against the other with their kunais in an attempt to overwhelm their opponent through physical strength. They separated by leaping backwards after seeing their first strategy was ineffective and circled each other with matching quick speed. Sakura was very upset while she stomped her way through the streets towards Field 14. Earlier, her parents had awoken her insanely early in the morning, 5 a.m. to be precise, and had her prepare for the survival exercise she mentioned to her parents last night, and was given last-minute training to be ready for anything her sensei had in store for her team. Her parents were simply jovial to hear of Sakura being paired with Uchiha Sasuke, the Rookie of the Year, but they were furious in hearing of their daughter also paired with the Uzumaki boy. She was rather confused to hear her parents' venomous objections of having her paired with the demon child, they called him, but dismissed it as none of her business. Back on the issue at hand, Sakura was still upset and frustrated and tired with having to do those various exercises and fighting forms her parents had her do, even with her injured arm. At least she managed to have some food and not starve to death before she did her exercises, but that was a useless thing to do since she was now sore, tired and grumpy. She probably won't be able to perform her best and outperform Naruto, who she had come to hate for what he had done to her arm. There were definitely going to be scars left once her arm heals. 10 minutes later, Sakura made it to the training field and peered in every direction for a sign of Kakashi. What she found instead was Sasuke and Naruto in a semi-cross counter position, their right fists held by their opponent's left open hand. Thinking Sasuke-kun was in trouble, she wasted no time in rushing to his aid and pulled out a kunai and launched it straight for the blonde's head. What happened next shocked her to disbelief. Naruto caught the kunai with his teeth, and he was still holding his ground with Sasuke. Immediately after Naruto had caught Sakura's kunai, Sasuke turned his sights on his pink-haired teammate and back to Naruto in unspoken agreement of postponing their spar. Naruto nodded. They both stepped away, Naruto spitting out the kunai doing so, and Sasuke turned towards Sakura and gave her a frightening scowl which made the Haruno girl flinch and take a step back. "Fool, why did you attack Naruto? He and I were only sparring and you had to go and ruin it. Besides, what business did you have in interfering?" His voice was cold and clearly angry. Sakura, though still a little shaken, replied meekly, "I am sorry. I thought Uzumaki W was attacking you and I wanted T to help you. Please, don't be angry at me, Sasuke-kun." Sasuke still held a furious face and remained such for about a minute before he sighed and turned away from Sakura and went back to his brooding on the tree he sat near earlier. While he brooded, he thought back to how he had acted just moments ago and to what he felt when he and Naruto were sparring. It was strange that he had suddenly raised his voice in defense for his blonde teammate who he knew little of, but it seemed to just come out of him so easily. Like defending a friend perhaps. In contrast to his spar with Naruto, it felt exhilarating, for lack of a better word. His blood was rushing through him like a raging river, and it excited him to feel himself push his performance to his best abilities. No one at the academy had been able to keep up with him when he wanted to train. He never considered training with girls because they never really participated and just ogled at him, and many of the stronger boys in class never wanted to associate with him for his distant nature he adopted after his parents were killed, far too intent on training to seek his revenge to allow any friends to possibly hinder his development. His thought continued like such for almost an hour until a poof was heard that derailed his musing, and Naruto and Sakura turned their sights to Kakashi, who was several paces away. "Hello, Team 7 Inches, he said casually with a wave. "Sorry I'm late, but I got lost on the road of life and—" "You liar. You're late again, you bastard." Naruto and Sakura yelled together at once. Though Sasuke said nothing, his brow was twitching quite vexingly. This sensei of theirs was impossibly irresponsible. It was almost a joke were it not at his team's expense as well as his own. Kakashi ignored his students' yells and placed a clock on one of the 3 training logs near the genins and turned to them while pulling out 2 bells from his pocket. "Alright team, this is your task. Take these bells from me before this clock reaches 12 p.m. Just in case you're confused as to the penalty, there are only 2 bells and 3 of you. And only the ones who capture the bells may eat while the other who doesn't get the bell will starve. Oh, and don't forget to attack with killing intent unless you prefer to fail with flying colors. Naruto and Sasuke only snorted in response to the Junin's taunts. This fool of a shinobi was obviously far too casual to ever be taken seriously. Kakashi had heard their snorts, but otherwise ignored it. Ready, steady, go. And the test went underway. 2 hours later from the start of the survival exercise, Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura had Kakashi surrounded, the former mentioned breathing hard and heavy from exhaustion. It was during the start of the test that Sasuke and Naruto had attacked Kakashi together in unison in their hopes of overwhelming the Junin with their teamwork. It had been proven effective in equalizing the odds in their favor, but they were unable to make any progress as Kakashi was an evasion and counter expert in combat. Because of this setback, they changed strategy knowing their endurance would diminish quickly if they continued to chase him and try to match him blow for blow and step for step. So Sasuke had opted to use his Kaiten, fire element, jutsus to attack from a distance and give Naruto cover with the debris from the fire blast explosions so the blonde could attack in close quarters, to which Sasuke would admit to only himself that Naruto excelled in. Their strategy had worked for a while, even giving Naruto and Sasuke opportunities to land a few blows on the slippery Junin. But Kakashi had too changed strategy and began an offensive against the genin pair. Were it not for Sakura, who had just managed to arrive while in search for Sasuke after she and the others had separated during the melee, Kakashi would have overtaken them in moments. Sakura had assisted by chucking shuriken and kunai at Kakashi while Naruto and Sasuke went to close-quarter combat with their taijutsu. Amazingly, their coordination with each other was almost perfect. Back to present, Kakashi was facing Pinky, Blondie, and Pretty Boy as he unofficially nicknamed them while his back was against a tree. Pinky had managed to turn the team's favor and now he was having difficulty keeping up with the three. Originally, he had intended to have them all go against each other by using the 2-belt 3 genin ploy, but it had made almost little difference because of Blondie's disregard to his suggestion to not eat in the morning. Looks like he hadn't planned too well. But, because of their success in cooperating with each other and working together, they had already passed the exam. Now to see it through. While Naruto and Sasuke were closing in steadily, Kakashi suddenly executed several hand seals and burrowed into the ground before either Naruto or Sasuke could reach him. Naruto growled in frustration. He knew this was getting them nowhere and Kakashi would have all the time he needed to recover his strength and then they would all be at square one. That's it, thought Naruto angrily, I'm ending this now. He's had his fun, but I'm growing tired of this game of cat and mouse. Prepare yourself, Kakashi, because I'm not taking any prisoners. Crossing his forefingers together, Naruto summoned 6 cage bunchins, and with a fierce war cry, he punched his whole arm into the ground beneath his feet and grabbed an appendage from the Junin he had felt moving beneath the ground and literally ripped Kakashi from the earth like a demon usurping a corpse from the grave. Kakashi didn't even have time to yell for help, as futile as that would have been before Naruto's cage bunchins came on top of him after being slammed painfully on the ground. 2 bunchins gripped his legs while 2 other bunchins grappled his arms and one opted to hold the Junin by the neck in a choking position. The last bunchin had hanged into a length of rope for the real Naruto to tie Kakashi's limbs together. While he tied his limbs up, one of the bunchins went rummaging in Kakashi's pouch. Naruto-kun, what are you doing? Kakashi asked fearfully, strange considering his rather stoic persona seen more often than not. You shouldn't be going through other people's things without permission. Naruto ignored the man's pleads and continued his rummaging, intent on finding exactly what this Junin had that could make him late for hours at a time. Wait, that felt like a book cover? Slowly, Naruto drew the item in his grasp from the confines of Kakashi's pouch, and became furiously livid. There in his grasp was in fact a male's best friend a male could have in all of the shinobi villages far and wide. An Icha Paradise novel. Naruto had heard what the series was about via Sarutobi Jiji's stash he had in his office he had found when visiting the old man one time before while in the academy. And now the answer became crystal clear as to why this pervert was always late. He chose to read whole series of perverted books in his spare time and missed his appointments because of it. It was safe to assume that once Naruto had showed the novel to his teammates after he managed to get them out of their shocked stupor from witnessing his strength, Kakashi had 3 awful things happen to him in this order. 1. His book was burned to dust, courtesy of Sasuke's fire jutsu. 2. The bells he had tied around his waist were taken with ease and was berated severely for being a pervert, courtesy of Sakura's tongue lashing. And 3. Naruto had given the suggestion of giving him the worst and most horrible punishment yet that never should be used against anyone unless absolutely necessary, the 1000 years of pain. When Naruto promises himself some vindictive payback, he means to uphold his promises with a passion and interest. Naruto's POV. 2 months have passed since my team and I have solidified our ranks and have done numerous missions more suitable for children that wanted a low pay salary. Some of our assignments were, for lack of a better term, aggravating and pointless. Especially when my team and I had the misfortune of retrieving a dumb cat named Tora, for this obese opera singer who was wife to the Fire Country daimyo. We had to capture and return the same cat 5 times. Since my teammates shared my views on the pointlessness of actually dealing with this same cat for over 2 weeks straight, I gave a suggestion of using my Kage Bunshin no Jutsu as a way to fool the cat owners into thinking their cat was dead and the real Tora would be released outside the Fire Country border. They agreed all too eagerly and we heard only a week later that the daimyo's wife's cat had suddenly died. The versatility of my Kage Bunshin no Jutsu simply amazes me. During the time of our group's gatherings, Sasuke and I had managed to build a kind, rivalry friendship, where we would spar and teach each other a jutsu or 2 in hopes of getting stronger. He and I had built an agreement to teach each other 1 jutsu to each other once a week. It was much like a game where progress was the aim of the endeavor. In 2 weeks, I had managed to learn and perfect the Kaden, Housenka no Jutsu, fire element, art of the fire flower, and Ryuka no Jutsu, art of the dragon fire. They were incredibly powerful techniques that required vast amounts of chakra, but that was no setback for me with my chakra abundance. In turn, I had taught Sasuke 2 jutsus as well, though they were not quite so explosively powerful. The Shuriken Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, art of the Shuriken Shadow Double, and Doku Kiri no Jutsu, art of the Poison Mist, which were 2 other jutsus I had memorized and practiced from the Forbidden Scroll. Sasuke had them perfected in only 10 days, where I took about 12 to familiarize myself with the 2 Kaden jutsus he taught me. Sakura remained distant from me and never wanted to approach me under any circumstance, always glaring at me when she wasn't looking at Sasuke every hour, on the hour. Not that I minded, only it was becoming irritating as time continued. Kakashi decided to ignore what transpired around him, only giving half attempts to settle any arguments that erupted between Sakura and I when she decided to blow things out of proportion. Even after he pledged never to have an Icha Paradise novel while with his team, he was still ridiculously irresponsible. History review aside, my team and I were currently in the Hokage's tower while we waited for Sarutobi Gigi to issue a new assignment for us, while we stood erect before a long table set sideways with Iruka-sensei, Sarutobi Gigi, and 2 elders. An old woman with gray hair in a bun fashion wearing robe brown with white sashes and an old man with rectangular glasses, gray short hair and obviously lean, wearing a white sash that curled around his neck that covered his neck and shoulders over a dark-colored robe reaching his feet. Iruka was on the far end of the table. My patience was thinning by the second, though I didn't show it, and was ready to scream in Saru Gigi's ear when he suddenly spoke up and told us our assignment, planting sweet potatoes for a couple's garden. I damn near blew my top off. Instead, I said slowly and angrily, my protests. Hokage Gigi, we've done more than enough small assignments like these to last a lifetime. Can we please have a more challenging task? I believe my teammates share my sentiments in this issue. True to my words, both Sasuke and Sakura were eager to have a change in mission difficulty and allowed something a little more exciting. Saru Gigi calmly observed us all and our reactions and sighed while he fished for another scroll on the table. He skimmed through it for the better part of a minute before he stopped and selected something. Grinning, he told us our new assignment. It just so happens that there's a bridge builder that needs escort to the Land of Waves for protection against possible bandits that could lie lurking along the main roads and paths connecting our 2 lands together. Why don't you introduce yourselves to him? Come in, Tazuna-san. As if on cue, a large, rather muscular old man with glasses, white spiky hair came through the doors on our right. He had a sake bottle in hand and his clothes were like a sailor's. He chugged a gulp of sake before his scrutinizing gaze passed across us all and he frowned immediately. "You're giving me a bunch of snot-nosed brats to protect me?" he slurred. "You don't expect me to trust these kids to keep me safe, do ya? Especially Blondie there. He's got the face of an imbecile. Oh, this man just signed his name on a tombstone." I scowled and felt great satisfaction in seeing him cringe in fear from my piercing stare. My voice was caked with venom when I replied, "I'll give you fair warning for future reference, old man. Either you hold your tongue or I swear bandits will be the least of your worries, because I'll slit your throat before you can even scream." I felt a swell of pride in myself when I saw the old man's terrified visage. He looked ready to empty his bowels at any moment. I could only guess my teammates' reactions. All but Sakura, who was easily readable, as the cold sweat started forming around her forehead that dripped down her chin. Kakashi coughed into his fist in an attempt to deflate the situation. "Naruto," Kakashi said to me, "if you kill our client, our mission will be over before it even starts." I exhaled loudly and grumbled in agreement. Sarujiji saw that this peace was momentary at best, so he quickly gave us permission to leave and pack what things we needed for a month or more. My team and I left briskly out the tower and went separate ways to our respective homes and packed what we needed. I had 3 pairs of slab-armored net shirts and another dark orange jumpsuit in case the one I was currently wearing tore and became unwearable. Kunais, shuriken, needles, and some new weapons I had purchased after the survival exercise. Reverse G-shaped hand axes that were razor-sharp to the touch. I folded all my cloths in a backpack, placed all my weapons I couldn't fit in my pouch in the pack pockets, and took off towards the East Village gates where Kakashi had told me and my teammates to meet with him and Tazuna. When I had arrived, my teammates were already there and waiting with Kakashi and Tazuna. No words were exchanged and we exited the village gates with some trepidation, though I was slightly excited to step out the village gates for once. It was a shame for me that I never knew what awaited for us along our journey. I don't think my team knew what either. That's all for now. If you enjoyed, then please like, share and do comments.